Hello, it's a dark episode for August 7th, 2022. Jay here. I finished the first book in the Apprentice Adept series by Piers Anthony, Split Infinity. It's a reread, and it's a real revisiting of my adolescent, early adolescent years, 12, 13, 14, when I was really into all things Piers Anthony and read a lot of his books, a lot of his, Xanth series especially, but his other books as well. And I happened to find the middle version of this in a free library, so I decided, okay, I'm going to read this series. I'm going to read, well, the first book, three books in this series, because they went on afterwards. And I'm just going to go with the first three because that seems to be one complete thing on its own. And indeed, the first book seems like it's the first third of a story, following style a diminutive jockey on a science fiction planet Proton, who is then hops back and forth into phase this fantasy world, and he's got a robot woman who loves him. He's got a unicorn woman who loves him. He meets a sexy yellow adept magician, wizard, whatever, who kind of finds him hot, and it's like, maybe something will happen there. There's a lot of that, and he's Style is a terrific guy. He is, yes, very attractive to the women. He is really good in something called the game in the science fiction world, which is kind of a fun kind of tournament style thing where you go up rungs, and the ultimate prize in that is you get to be a citizen if you won the thing, and you get to live on uh, Proton permanently, and also not be a serf anymore. The serfs all walk around naked, so he's just buck naked through all those sections. Um, yeah, it's one of these books that I don't want to take my youth out on this book, and I don't want to roast it unfairly using 2022 goggles on it. Yet at the same time, I think it's fairly kind of odd and quirky, and yet kind of semi-reflective of the 80s in a way. Piers Anthony it's this odd time in the 80s where it's perfectly okay to have kind of young adult stuff that was quite sexual. Though the thing about that is, I don't really read much of the YA today, but there's some of the YA today which seems like way more sexual and has way more kind of freaky stuff in it that is going to be, give it 5 years, give it a year, give it now, and he's already getting roasted for weird stuff in it. There's something about that I think really appeals to the especially adolescent mind, of you're just kind of testing boundaries, and you're super into sex, and you're just body, 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 and all your urges and all your insecurities. And Style is very, very capable and very intelligent, and very like, I'm short, no woman who is taller than me who would be worth having would ever have me, which is like, that's fucked up. But I'm also looking at it as from the standpoint of a guy who's always been above average height. However, I think about that, and like, if you're a young reader and you're kind of short right now because you haven't hit your growth spurt yet, that would be very appealing. And as being a young guy, it's like you want all these women to love you. There's a lot of weird stuff in this book about kind of sex and stuff like that, of him of basically kind of raping, coercing the the robot woman and the unicorn woman, which is like, that's a thing That is an odd power dynamic, and it's couched within a power dynamic of he's a serf. He's basically a slave to the citizens. So he's very much cast as I am the oppressed guy here. But it's interesting being cast as the oppressed guy, but having all this kind of weird power dynamics over the females in his life, which kind of semi-resonates with sort of how oppressed white guys can feel now, while at the same time, yeah, taking it out on the females in our culture at the same time. So there's that. Yeah, yeah, yeah. I want to treat the book fairly. There's definitely lots of interesting stuff going on, which is what I think is what appeals to me. It didn't keep. I finished this first volume, and it's like, oh, this was all really interesting stuff. Was it good stuff? I don't know. Um, he is definitely kind of it's smoothly written, workmanlike prose. He explains stuff clearly. He describes action quite clearly. There's an exciting ping pong match in here, for of all things. Um, he talks a lot about kind of horses, and you get like a lot of horse knowledge in here. It's very science fictiony and kind of that sense of like the info dump of we're gonna know all the stuff about right down to horse poop. It's really knows the stuff, which not surprisingly, the one of the female mare in this book is apparently based on his daughter's horse, which his main character fucks, which is okay, interesting. Um, yeah, and there's just this whole thing of like, Nessa is a female, but she's also a horse, and the whole thing of breaking her and treating her like a horse is kind of, it's a weird dynamic. It's just all this stuff that makes me feel uncomfortable reading him. Um, but never bored, never bored. So, I mean, it's very individual. It feels to me. Feels very individual to Piers Anthony in a way. That is, does that make it not trash because it's not generic, or is it generic because it's very much using kind of all the fantasy, he's the special boy kind of tropes that way? I don't know. I don't know. Yeah, but I've already done one check-in with the book, but I wanted to do another one which is a bit more, how am I feeling about it? You know, how am I feeling as my teen self? Because there's parts of this I still kind of like, and yet there's other ways just like, yeah, there's a reason why I stopped reading this stuff. You know, if it's not something I'm gonna dive back into the oeuvre of Piers Anthony. I don't think. Just because I think after a while of this stuff, I think I'd probably get sick and tired of his freaky, weird sexual politics and his, yeah, and I know some of the other books get even really more, like Bio the Space Merchant, the Space Tyrant, and what's it, Firefly, or some book where there's just some really wrong stuff going on in these books, and you just gotta wonder how much of this is exploring stuff and how much of this is indulging in the author is indulging in his own kind of kinks that way. All right, which I'm one to talk about that, because that's what you inevitably kind of do, is you end up dwelling on the stuff that is lodged in your brain somehow, and this stuff is definitely lodged in Piers Anthony's brain. He revisits a lot of this stuff. All right, Theo is about to bark, so I will end this more very bookish dark video, and probably put it also in with my one of my Piers Anthony musings, and see where it gets me. I'm thinking about actually reading his autobiography that goes up to him at 50, which is right around, writing it in the kind of the height of his popularity, where he's taken the advantage to apparently settle scores and all that sort of stuff, and he doesn't come across very well according to some of the reviews, so it might be interesting to look at that as well. All right, I will leave it there. More videos later.